The scaffolding around the old community centre creaked in the wind, a mournful, metallic sound that matched the state of Eli's life. At 43, he was standing on a narrow plank 3 stories up, a paint-splattered radio playing static-heavy country music clinging to the skeleton of a building he was supposed to be helping to restore. He was a temp, a day labourer, the lowest rung on a ladder he'd spent the last 2 decades falling down. 5 years ago, Eli had owned a chunk of this very block. He'd had a thriving construction business, a sharp-suited wife named Serena, and a son, Leo, who was his entire universe. He built things. That was his gift. He could see a finished house in a pile of lumber. He'd built his company from 1 rusty truck to a fleet of 10. He'd built a beautiful life. And then, piece by piece, he'd torn it all down. It wasn't one dramatic moment, but 1,000 small ones. A celebratory drink after a big contract became a nightly ritual. A beer to unwind became a bottle to forget the growing pressure. The pressure of payroll, of competition, of the relentless need to be bigger, better. The bottle became his foreman, and it was a terrible one. He missed deadlines. He snapped at clients. His sharp eye for detail went blurry. The day he lost it all was a Tuesday. Serena sat him down in their sun-drenched kitchen. Leo, just 10 years old, hovering in the hallway. She didn't yell. Her voice was as quiet and final as a door clicking shut. "He's scared of you, Eli. I'm scared of you. The man you are now. He's not the man I married. He's not the father my son deserves." The bankruptcy followed 6 months later, a mere formality, stamping a legal seal on a life already in ruins. Now, he was painting the very building Serena had once tried to get funding to save, a project he'd scoffed at as unprofitable. A money pit, he'd called it. Now he was a ghost in its walls, earning cash under the table to pay for a weekly motel room and the bottom-shelf whiskey that was his only consistent companion. His boss on the site, a burly man named Gus, was the opposite of Eli's former self. Gus was slow, methodical, and kind. He'd give Eli a look when he showed up with shaking hands, a look of disappointment, not anger. It was worse than anger. One Thursday, Gus asked him to help unload a truck of donated supplies. It was mostly old desks and chairs from a school that was closing. As Eli hoisted a scratched wooden desk, he saw a name carved into the side with a shaky child's hand. Leo R. The world tilted. He gripped the desk, his knuckles white. It was from his son's old elementary school. He ran his thumb over the uneven letters, and for the first time in years, he didn't see a failure. He didn't see the past. He saw a little boy, full of life, scratching his name into his territory. A boy who loved to build things with his dad, who would spend hours in the workshop handing him nails and asking a million questions. A memory, sharp and painful, pierced the alcoholic fog. Leo, age 7, proudly presenting him with a birdhouse. It was lopsided, the roof was askew, and the paint was a chaotic swirl of colours, but it had a tiny, perfectly round door. For the birds to go in and out, Leo had explained, his eyes shining. Eli had been on the phone, stressed about a deal, and had waved him away. "That's great, buddy. Go show your mother." The light in Leo's eyes had dimmed. He had built something and offered it to his father, and his father had been too busy falling apart to see it. Standing there in the dusty community center gymnasium, holding that desk, Eli finally saw the truth. His life wasn't just broken, he had broken it, and the people he'd hurt most weren't his creditors or his former clients. They were Serena, who had loved a builder and ended up with a wrecker, and Leo, whose simple, beautiful offering of a lopsided birdhouse he had rejected. That night, he didn't buy a bottle. He sat in his motel room, the scratchy orange bedspread beneath him, staring at the wall. The craving was a physical ache, a phantom limb of a habit. But every time the urge surged, he saw the name Leo R. carved into the wood. He thought of the birdhouse. He thought of the look in Serena's eyes the day she left. The next morning, he went to Gus. "I need a real job," he said, his voice hoarse. "Not day labor. I need to be part of this. I'll work for minimum wage. I'll sweep floors. But I need to be part of building something again." Gus studied him for a long moment. He saw the tremor in Eli's hand, the broken capillaries on his nose, but he also saw something else, a desperate, flickering ember of the man he must have once been. "All right, Eli, we start at 7. Don't be late." Eli wasn't late, he was early. He threw himself into the work with a fervor he hadn't felt in a decade. He started on his knees, scraping old tile, his body screaming in protest. He graduated to framing interior walls, his hands remembering the precision they'd lost. He'd stay after hours, studying the architectural plans, remembering how to read the language of beams and load-bearing walls. He went to AA meetings in the church basement next door. He didn't speak for the first 3 weeks. He just sat in the back, listening to other stories of wreckage, recognizing the same debris in his own soul. When he finally stood up and introduced himself, his voice cracked on his name. "My name is Eli, and I'm an alcoholic." Saying it out loud was like taking the first swing of a sledgehammer at a concrete wall. The renovation became his recovery. Each nail he hammered was a small atonement. Each wall he straightened was a promise to himself to straighten out his own life. He stopped seeing the building as a money pit and started seeing it for what it was, a place of potential, a place where kids could come after school, learn, play, and be safe. It was the kind of place he wished had been there for Leo, Gus noticed. He gave Eli more responsibility, then put him in charge of a small crew. One day, they were working on what would be the main arts and crafts room. Gus handed him a stack of donation forms. "We need a volunteer to run the woodworking shop when we open. Someone who knows their way around a saw and has the patience to teach. You know any burnouts looking for redemption?" Eli looked at the form. It was for a beginner's woodworking class for kids. His heart hammered against his ribs. He thought of the birdhouse. "I'll do it," he said. The day the community center opened, it was a crisp fall morning. A small crowd had gathered. Eli, clean-shaven, his eyes clear, stood nervously in the doorway of the woodworking shop. He'd spent the week building small projects, simple birdhouses, napkin holders, little cars to use as examples. He'd made sure each one had a perfectly round, perfectly sanded door, and then, through the crowd, he saw them. Serena, her hair longer now, a sad, hesitant smile on her face, and beside her, a young man of 15, tall and lanky, with his father's dark eyes, Leo. Serena walked up to him. "Gus called me," she said softly. "He said you were building something important. He said you were better." Eli couldn't speak. He just nodded, tears burning his eyes. He looked past her at Leo, who was staring at the workshop, at the rows of little saws and sanding blocks. "Leo," Eli said, his voice a whisper. Leo met his gaze. There was a wall there, built of years of disappointment. Eli knew he couldn't tear it down in a day, but maybe he could start building a door. He gestured into the room, at the small, perfect birdhouse he'd placed on the central workbench. "I was wondering," he said, his voice stronger now, "if you might want to help me build one of these. I think I might have forgotten how to make the door right." Leo looked at the birdhouse, then at his father. He saw the tremor in his hand was gone. He saw a face that was older, wearier, but no longer haunted. He saw a builder. Slowly, a small, cautious smile touched his lips. "The door's the most important part," Leo said. "It's how they get in and out." Eli nodded, a tear finally escaping down his cheek. "Yeah," he said, "it is." As Leo walked past him into the workshop, Eli glanced around the bright, new room. He had spent years of his life raising buildings, but this was different. This wasn't just a renovation of lumber and drywall, it was a renovation of the heart. He had finally stopped tearing things down. He was building something that mattered. He was building a way home, moral. It is never too late to stop tearing down and start building up both the world around you and the person within you.